We are all aware of that one house in the neighbourhood, the one that is usually abandoned and looks like the set of a horror movie, or the one that is occupied but is surrounded in dark rumours. Some houses just give that creepy, eerie vibe. These 5 fit that bill like no other, and some of their backstories behind them is truly terrifying. Make sure to stay for number 2 because we have a special announcement. As always, hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. The Iowa Axe Murder House. If there are any skeptics out there, then apparently this is the house you need to spend the night in. Because by sunrise, you'll become a believer in paranormal entities. It's the Villisca Axe Murder House in Iowa, and was the scene of one of the grisliest murder cases in American history. On June the 10th, 1912, Joshua Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, along with Ina and Lena Stillinger, who was staying over, were found bludgeoned to death by an axe. Supposedly, according to 2 cigarettes found in the attic, the killer may have been waiting for them up there for the Moore family and the guests to fall asleep before attacking. They were all slaughtered with such force that axe marks were left gouged into the ceilings. In the downstairs guest room, a large slab of bacon was found, and next to it, the killer had placed the bloody murder weapon and a broken keychain. In the kitchen, there was a plate of food next to a bowl of blood-filled water. The crazed killer also draped clothes over the smashed-up faces of his victims, and covered every mirror and exposed window with a cloth. Despite there being several suspects, the heinous murders have never been solved, and the killer would have remained at large for the remainder of their life. Today, the house is a tourist attraction. It's decorated as it would have been on that fateful night, and has no electricity or running water. The house has been investigated by various paranormal investigators, and people who have spent the night there all report the same thing. The feeling of heaviness from the stairs up to the bedrooms, orbs, and at 2 AM, the sound of a train's whistle. This is thought to be the time of the murders. Paranormal rumours aside, the look and feel of this house is undeniably eerie, and just thinking that someone could kill people with such ferocity and never be caught is a truly terrifying thought. If anyone has ever stayed the night there, then please share your experience. Frankfurt House. This one was sent to me by a viewer called Jack, and it has it all: ghosts, murders, mystery, and some interesting photos. In 1999, a guy called Kevin Ziegler, who is a friend of Jack's mother, purchased a house in Frankfurt, a house that had stood empty for some 15 years. Shortly after he moved in, he would experience silverware disappearing, doors opening in the middle of the night, and coffee mugs exploding. One night, while Skyping with a friend, he stepped away from the camera, and while he was gone, his friend saw the ghost of a little girl, standing in front of the camera. Another time, a neighbour knocked on his door, saying there was a little girl dangling her feet from the 3rd floor window, and was at risk of falling. Ziegler also claimed that on the night of October the 22nd, he would always hear a girl crying and screaming. In 2003, Ziegler was at the Fall Festival in Frankfurt, when an elderly man approached him, who knew he was the owner of the creepy house. He told Kevin that his wife had grown up in the house and had experienced paranormal beings. The elderly man also explained the history of the house. The first ghost, Sarah, was an immigrant who had a fever while crossing the Atlantic. She died at the property in 1909, aged just 10 years old. Sadie, the second ghost, was 12 when she died. She boarded a train in Boston to move away from her abusive parents, and got off in Frankfurt in 1901. She then got a job at the house as a maid, which at the time was a bordello. One night, a man by the name of Will mistook Sadie as a prostitute, and she was raped, beaten, and had her throat slit. Sadie was then wrapped in a sheet by workers and buried in a grave by the nearby train tracks. Both Sarah and Sadie died in the same room on the 3rd floor. Kevin listened to the old man, but was still unsure, so he asked nearby residents and neighbours, who all confirmed the stories were true. In another creepy twist, he discovered the date Sadie died was the 22nd of October. Ziegler has since moved to Florida, and it's rumoured that the girls have followed him. the haunted house of St. Mark's Road in Bangalore, India. This abandoned house in Bangalore, India has the reputation of being one of the most haunted buildings in India. And with its history, it's easy to see why. It was built in 1943 by E.J. Vass and was given to his unmarried daughters, Vera and Dulce. They lived happily there until on the morning of September the 4th, 2002, Dulce was brutally murdered in front of her sister by an unknown person. Her heartbroken sister had her body buried within the house, and from then on, it's alleged her spirit rose and began haunting the building. Many people claim to hear screaming and get attacked by unseen forces when they walk by the house. The property went up for sale, but due to its reputation, no one else ever lived in it. It's since been demolished, but because of its notoriety, even the land it once stood on is thought to resonate negative energy, and no one is interested in purchasing it. The lady who brought this house to my attention lives nearby, and she has had her own strange experience of the area. She was with friends heading to a restaurant on St. Mark's Road, but didn't cross the road with them, so had to walk past the site of the demolished house. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, but when she got to the restaurant, her friends pointed out a big red patch on her back that was not there previously. She believes that this could have something to do with the house's once dark reputation. What do you think? Before I get started with this next one, I want to let you know that Top 5s now has Patreon. Don't worry though, we are not begging for money or going anywhere if we do not hit our goals, far from it. But if you check it out, you will see what it's all about and how we think it's not only going to benefit Top 5 as a whole, but most importantly, the viewers. I won't give away too much, but think full-length serial killer documentaries and an unexplained podcast. Go check it out and see what I'm talking about. Ed Gein's House of Horrors. Ed Gein has been a topic in a few of our videos, but I wanted to focus on his house and what drove him to decorate it with the body parts of his victims. The secluded farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin was purchased by Gein's mother, Augusta, in 1914. Gein was around 8 years old, and she wanted to move to the secluded location to stop her sons from having any outside influences, and Gein and his brother only left the house to go to school. They were not allowed friends, and his mother, who was a devout Lutheran, preached to Ed and his brother Henry about the evils and immortality of the world, sitting down with them every afternoon to read passages from the Bible, usually selecting graphic verses from the Old Testament dealing with death, murder, and divine retribution. In 1940, Gein's father died, and his brother Henry was starting to reject his mother's views, much to the horror of Ed. In 1944, Ed and Henry were caught up in a bushfire, and Henry lost his life. Ed was left living with his mother in the house until she died a year later, leaving him grief-stricken and all alone in the isolated, creepy farmhouse. This is when it's thought Gein's reign of terror began. It wasn't until 1957 that police suspected he was involved in the disappearance of local store clerk Bernice Worden, and a search of the house and surrounding property was conducted. In a shed on the property, Warden's headless corpse was found, hung upside down, with a torso split open and emptied of its organs. In the house, they found human skin that was used to cover chairs and make a lampshade. On Gein's bedposts, he had mounted human skulls, and the skull caps were being used as soup bowls. One of the ceiling light poles was human lips, and the head of Mary Hogan, another missing woman, was found in a paper bag. They also found clothing made with human adornments, such as a belt covered in human nipples, a mammary vest made out of a woman's torso, and socks made from human flesh. A collection of shrunken heads was also found that Ed had made into masks. After being questioned, Gein admitted that after his mother died, he would dig up the fresh graves of middle-aged women, take their bodies home, and use them as part of macabre ornaments for his home. While Gein was in detention for his crimes, his house was scheduled to be sold off to auction, and there was rumours that it was going to be turned into a macabre tourist attraction. But on March 27, 1958, the house burnt to the ground. Today, the site is a magnet for tourists, and there is even an Ed Gein road trip. The extensive land surrounding the original farmhouse has never been properly searched, and it's possible that some of Gein's secrets are still lurking beneath the ground. Jonestown. This one is a little off topic, but I've always wanted to talk about it. In regards to creepy houses, I will use the houses of the Jonestown people, who all died, as the thought that they once lived in these houses is an incredibly eerie thought, and photos of the houses have always given me a creepy feeling. There is so much information to talk about this that it needs a full video, but in 1955, Jim Jones founded and headed the People's Temple, a new religious movement that combined elements of Christianity with socialist politics and racial equality. Over the years, Jones became a controversial figure, but had built up a substantial following. In 1974, he negotiated a lease on 3,800 acres of jungle in northwestern Guyana. Construction began on what would later be known as Jonestown, and followers were encouraged to relocate from their homes in the US to their new settlement, a place he described as a socialist paradise and sanctuary away from media scrutiny. However, once they arrived, they discovered that living conditions were basic, the heat was unbearable, and the bugs and lack of privacy were far from the utopia they had been promised. Despite this, by 1978, nearly 1,000 followers had relocated there. The residents worked long hours in the snake-infested fields, and the food was scarce, but Jones seemed to have brainwashed his followers into staying, although a growing number were becoming disillusioned with their new life, and became concerned about Jones's increasingly erratic and ominous behaviour. Then in November 1978, US Rep. Leo Ryan flew to Guyana to investigate claims that the People's Temple members were being held at Jonestown against their will. He was joined by worried relatives, journalists, and delegation staff. During his visit, Ryan met several members who sought help to return to the US. He also managed to rescue a group of followers who wanted to escape the Jonestown regime immediately. This move angered Jones so much that he sent a group of gunmen to the airstrip where Ryan was waiting to board his plane, and they ambushed and killed him, along with 4 others. Back at Jonestown, Jim rallied his followers and was heard on audio saying, "We've had as much of this world as you're going to get. Let's just be done with it. Let's be done with the agony of it." He then ordered his followers to drink Kool-Aid that was full of cyanide. More than 900 people died, around 300 of which were children. Some who refused to drink the poison were forcibly injected instead. Jones himself died of a single gunshot wound, thought to be self-inflicted. It was the largest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act until the terrible events of September the 11th. Today, a memorial in Oakland, California, serves as a tribute for those who died. But there is no memorial on the site where so many lost their lives. The compound was left eerily deserted before the Guyanese government allowed its reoccupation by refugees from Laos for a few years in the early 1980s. The building and grounds were looted by local Guyanese people, but were never taken over because of their association with the mass killing. In the mid-80s, the buildings were destroyed by fire, after which the ruins were left to rot and be reclaimed by the jungle. Few people have visited the site since, although in 1998 Jim Jones Jr. went back to his former home and chillingly recognised a drum that was used during mealtimes, and which he believed was used to hold the poisoned Kool-Aid. In 2003, on the 25th anniversary of the tragedy, a TV crew filmed at the overgrown site and uncovered a standing still Cassavana mill, the only significant structure still standing. Other miscellaneous items were also discovered, a chilling reminder of the families that once lived there. Today, little remains of the rows of shared dorms or the radio room which Jones delivered his propaganda broadcasts. It's rumoured that beneath the compound, Jones built a labyrinth of tunnels in preparation for the nuclear attack he prophesied, where he allegedly stashed gold nuggets. For the people who died there, the sad reality is that in life they were isolated, and in death very few remembered them. Of the 900 people who died that terrible day, over 400 of them were never claimed, and their bodies were buried in a mass grave in Oakland, California. In 2014, remains of 5 victims of the massacre, were found in an abandoned Delaware mortuary where they had lain forgotten for 36 years. So that's 5 houses with terrifying and tragic backstories. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.